One of my big hobbies these days is to take very collegiate forms of criticism and apply it to digital texts. Not necessarily in the popular vein, but outside of what we would consider mainstream media. This has been a absolute, just joy for me. Anybody who's been following my videos knows that I'm very interested in science fiction, although that's more popular. But I got started with these videos offering a little bit of criticism to YouTube poops. These really just out there remixes. I got a lot of these ideas from Ian Bagost. I really should not throw his name out there because I am not worthy. But, you know, the idea of bringing just really, really complex interpretation to a digital text, whether it be a game, whether it be a video, or what I'm growing increasingly more interested in now, a comic. It's amazing the material you can dig out from these less mainstream, more raw forms of art. I would say raw in a lot of ways. And in fact, it's funny because I've run into a text recently that has kind of thrown me for a loop because I had a hard time understanding why I connected so well with it. And I'm going to include a link in the video description. The text is, of course, Bittersweet Candy Bowl, the webcomic. And for those of you who don't know what this is, I'm sure most of you do if I know my fan base. Bittersweet Candy Bowl is a comic with anthropomorphic animal high school students. And it is, in every sense of the word, a typical high school drama. I mean, that's it. That's all. It's just love triangles and stuff. I mean, literally, love triangles and stuff. And I got hopelessly addicted to this thing. And I was like spending nights on my iPad reading the stuff. And every once in a while my wife would look over and she's like, "Are you still reading that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And it's literally just like, it's almost the equivalent, in my opinion, of like a webcomic Gossip Girl or something, to use that terminology. I know the author will probably be really mad at me for making that comparison, but I started thinking a lot about, well, what is it about this webcomic that's got me so interested? And so I started thinking about some texts I've been reading lately, and I've always been really interested in existentialism. And I've read it off and on over the years. I recently just got finished. I read the entire Being and Nothingness by Sartre. I've been reading, I actually just got finished with introducing Heidegger. That's not an actual text by Heidegger, but it's like a commentary on him. And one of the things that I was really interested in with Heidegger is Heidegger had this idea that language is one of the biggest problems with mankind. And he got this idea from a lot of Eastern mythologies, things like Taoism and Buddhism, that dualistic thinking is a huge problem, right? And the actual real issue is language itself, not because of any inherent flaws, but because semantic language is, it's semantic, it's symbolic of reality, and there is a divorce from reality. Right? There's a really awkward separation between the words you say and the words you're trying to communicate and the reality that you're trying to represent. And I know this is extremely boring, but hold on, I'll get to the comic in a minute, I promise. Well, it's a funny thing because Heidegger introduced this idea that ideogrammic language would be a better way of communicating. And ideogrammic language is more akin to Chinese or Japanese, where they have the kanji and where they actually represent being through images that actually depict the words that they symbolize. And you can actually look it up and see what these images were and how they correlate. And as I was reading this, I was like, you know what? It's kind of funny that in a lot of ways comics operate in a weird ideogrammic context, right? That you can say a lot with an image. You can say a lot with a comic that you couldn't otherwise say if you were just trying to write it out. So I started thinking about comics a lot, and it was like, how do comics communicate with us using picture language? And it's not exactly ideograms, but there's still a lot of communication that goes on in comics. So I've been searching for a good comic to actually do an analysis of this on, and I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff out there, and for some weird reason, Bittersweet Candy Bowl just falls right down, and there it is, and I can't stop reading it. And with all those alternatives, I kept asking myself, why this one? What is it about this one that has caught my attention so thoroughly? And it's a really tough question to answer, because I know that it somehow connects to existentialism, because it was Heidegger that introduced this idea, right? Well, if you read Bittersweet Candy Bowl, and it will take you a while, and it will be frustrating, but I promise you, I believe it was worth reading through. There's something absolutely delicious about teen angsty drama. And I was like, I've never enjoyed anything like this before. So what is it exactly? And I kept thinking back to Neon Genesis Evangelion. And I know a lot of you are screaming at me right now, and that's okay. But Neon Genesis was very formative for me when I was younger. Not because it's a great anime, not because it's a great story, but because if you do research on what's going on in the anime, there's actually a lot of existentialism that comes out in it. There's a lot about choice. There's a lot about authentic being. That these characters, part of the reason they suffer so much is because they're alienated from their own ability to create themselves. And it goes beyond just the fact that the protagonists of Evangelion are teenagers. It's deeper than that. For Evangelion, the angst of this comes from a very cosmological force, that there are actual gods involved. And there's also this idea of like the impending apocalypse, and it's just on this grandiose scale. Like, you can just go crazy with reading into existentialism with this because of the weight of the choices. And as I was reading Bittersweet Candy Bowl, I was like, a lot of this is very similar, that you see this very rooted adolescent angst, but it's not on the grand scale that Evangelion was on. And in a lot of ways, I actually think that's better in some ways, to actually have the conversation about existentialism, because existentialism does not play out in the grand cosmological space. Existentialism plays out in the everyday conversations and in the choices that we make. So let's finally get to Bittersweet Candy Bowl and see if we can pick out some of these terms, because I'm going to be honest. One of my dreams in life is to offer a course in philosophy. I would love to teach that course one day. Right now I'm teaching English and literature. I haven't got my PhD yet, so hopefully one day, maybe, you never know. But if I were ever to teach philosophy, especially if there was a good focus on existentialism, which there would be because I'm obsessed with it, I think Bittersweet Candy Bowl would actually be a required text. Like, they'd have to actually buy the book and read it and discuss it, because one of the things that the comic does is that you can actually look into the comic and find examples of so many of the terms that Heidegger, Kierkegaard, and Sartre came up with. And the one that I started with was bad faith. And bad faith is an absolutely fascinating idea. That one of the things that separates humans from animals, and this actually kind of has a doubly ironic context here, because the humans in Bittersweet Candy Bowl are animals. Anyway, one of the things that separates us from the animals is our ability to deceive ourselves, to root yourself in deception. Now, an animal exists in a very instinctual behavioral pattern. It is its actions. There's no deviation from it. But a man is different. Humans have a really odd ability to avoid things and to convince themselves of untruth. Now, bad faith, according to Sartre, his primary example of bad faith is the story of a woman. Two lovers are fighting over her. What does she do? She goes limp and lets them fight. That is one of the chief errors of existentialism, is choosing not to choose, right? That's self-deception, because you're still making a choice, but the choice in this case is just being abdicated. Now,